Welcome, everyone. My name is Tony Grote, and I want to begin today's session by thanking our sponsor today. Our sponsor for today's event is MCS, Empowering Rental Growth Through Rental Software Solutions to Manage Your Whole Business. So let us begin with a short video from our sponsor who makes today's event possible. Well, thank you everyone for joining today's event. Today's presentation is on mobile elevated work platforms, MEWPs, commonly referred to as MEWPs, you know that term. And we're going to talk about ensuring safe operations, which is specifically on the task of developing a MEWP safe use plan. My name is Tony Grote. I am the IPAF North America Regional Manager. I am actively involved in multiple industry standards related to mobile elevated work platforms. I'm the chairman of the ANSI A92.22 Safe Use Standard, which will be kind of the foundation of today's presentation, and the chair of the Canadian CSA B354.7 Safe Use and B354.8 MEWP training standards. And I'm also a US technical expert for the ISO TC 214 standards. Today's presentation, we have several objectives. One is to understand mobile elevated work platform user responsibility. The user is typically the employer of the mobile elevated work platform operators, and how to achieve those responsibilities. And in that regard, to prevent accidents, personal injuries, or property damage, to establish requirements for the application, inspection, training, maintenance, repair, and safe operations of MEWP. So it's all of those elements combined which are incorporated into a MEWP safe use plan to provide clear understanding of the respective responsibilities for the user, the employer, their supervisors, operators, and occupants, and ultimately to promote the safe and effective use of mobile elevated work platforms. But specifically today, I want to hit on the goal to have us think differently on how to ensure that we have a safe workplace. Uh, this picture is one that's been around for a while, and it speaks to the effectiveness of a safe use plan. So do you have one? And if yes, is it simply words on a piece of paper versus a true commitment to the safe and effective use and operation of the equipment? As we question, how do you measure safety in today's slides? A safe use plan is only a guide. Implementation is the commitment, and measurement defines the results of your plan. Management's commitment to develop, implement, and monitor a safe use plan is your best assurance to a safe and productive workplace will become a reality. IPAF is here to support the efforts, and we will assist you in developing a safe use plan as required within our standards. OSHA has an annual program in August known as Safe and Sound, where they promote the safe workplaces are sound businesses. So every workplace should have a safety and health program that includes management, leadership, worker participation, and a systemic approach to finding and fixing hazards. Specific to the ANSI A92.22 Safe Use Standard, it defines requirements for all users of mobile elevated work platforms to develop a MEWP-specific safe use plan or system of work. These two are aligned with the ANSI standards, focus specifically on the requirements for mobile elevated work platform safe use. So planning is not simply a requirement, but it's an important part of risk management with measurable returns on investments. A plan will provide direction, increasing efficiency, organization, and task coordination. It will reduce uncertainty and business risk, for all involved in the project. It will minimize waste and redundancy on the projects and set standards for controlling outcomes. And very important, it will assist in decision makings while you're going through your work project. So this session is going to focus in on mobile elevated work platforms as being the equipment selected as the best option to perform temporary work at height and how that will affect your planning. Consider Ladders Last as a program that will save lives. Ladders Last. It's an idea based on prevention rather than protection. This is accomplished by identifying other means to access, such as elevated work platforms, that better protect workers and support safe production rather than defaulting on the choice of ladders because it appears to be a low-cost option versus other options available that omits productivity and many other benefits. So when you're using a mobile elevated work platform, you have no climbing. You're not carrying tools while you're climbing and materials. It's immediately ready for work when you show up on the project, when it shows up on the project. It has a fully guardrail platform that moves as you move. It provides the exact elevation of where you want to be when you're doing the work and elevates and extends. It's available in large sizes for multiple people, and it's drivable at elevation. But all plans must identify all potential hazards associated with the task. IPAF has been maintaining mobile elevated work platform accident statistics for many years. As you can read from this chart of lost time incidents from 2016 to 2018, falls from height, electrocutions, entrapment, and MEWP overturns are the four most common causes of MEWP fatalities associated with MEWP operations. However, you can also see that there are many other issues to consider in your planning. Are the individuals performing your site risk assessments knowledgeable on all potential hazards? Does your plan take steps to protect against those known hazards? The day after an accident is the wrong time to evaluate your safe use plan. Do you have enough evidence to prove you are a safe company today? OSHA has what's known as a 5A1, or the General Duty Clause, that states that each employer shall furnish to each employee employment and place of employment which is free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm to its employees. A safe use plan is a real tool to support your company's risk management. So when you look at a 5A1, what constitutes an OSHA general duty violation? The employer failed to keep the workplace free from a hazard of which employees are exposed. No, if you have an accident, it's not really a good position of argument that you didn't provide a place free from hazards. Was the hazard recognized? And we're going to talk about, are these recognizable hazards? Is the hazard likely to cause death or physical harm? Obviously, the results speak for themselves. And is there a feasible or useful method to correct the hazard available? And we're going to talk about that today, especially in regards to developing your safe use plan. This is a famous picture that I've seen in many offices over the years, lunch atop a skyscraper, which is an iconic photograph of a 1932 picture of 11 construction workers seated along a cross beam of iron workers at the RCA building. Look at it, eating lunch, seated on a girder with their feet dangling 840 feet above the New York City streets during the last months of construction. So what do we accept today that we may not accept tomorrow? Here, look at this. No personal fall protection, no safety nets, no hard hats, no apparent fear of these workers that they're doing anything wrong. Is this a picture hanging in people's rooms trying to raise awareness of ineffective safety? I suggest it merely points to a time not that long ago where these were accepted work practices. What was accepted and what was their safety culture? Let's look at some choices that are being made. We too often see unseen actions that do not result in accidents. These companies survive years in unsafe work environments without an accident. Does that mean that these companies were safe? TJ Lyons, an industry safety professional, pointed out 3 dangerous words as a contractor. It's good enough. These words often translate that there's trouble lurking nearby, as enough indicates it could be better. We know it could be better, but choose shortcuts. What is the risk management strategy for these companies? Nothing happened, so they don't need to do anything. What are they measuring? If it's only accidents, they can't prevent these unsafe conditions from reoccurring, as they're not measuring anything to require an action. We can only act on what we report, including unsafe acts. The identification of improper activities or near misses can point us towards actions to prevent them from becoming an accident. That's why MEWP users must build on the foundation of a MEWP safe use plan. In order to achieve MEWP safe use operations, we must ask the question, how do we measure workplace safety? And let me state that safety is not the absence of accidents. Safety is actually the presence of defenses that prevent accidents. We must plan to reduce the consequences of accidents if they cannot be prevented. It is the ability to manage risk and avoid or mitigate incidents that can cause harm or damage. Here's an example of 3 recent accidents that occurred when inadequate planning took place. In one, you can see a storm with high winds was forecasted, but they didn't lower the lift until it was too late, resulting in a tip over and a fatality. Another, we were working near overhead power lines and the equipment came in contact with high voltage power lines, and the electricity traveled through the equipment into the ground and killed a worker standing in the ground nearby. And another one, working near a roadway, a driver is blinded by the morning sun and hit a platform that was extended into the roadway. Do you believe any of these workers perceived they were doing anything wrong? Can you see how an effective plan could prevent incidents? A MEWP safe use plan must go far beyond sending a person to complete MEWP operator training, renting a lift, and going to work. Planning is proactive, not reactive to site conditions. The plan must include requirements that all personnel be qualified to perform all the tasks. This site picture that I just placed up here will be referenced later, but it's an example of some planning taking place, but it proved to be inadequate. So, what is your plan? What does your plan look like? If I were to ask your employees what your plan was, would they be able to explain your plan? Again, is your plan simply send one of my personnel to get operator training, call a rental company, order a lift, and go to work? Go to work. Just get it done. If so, you may want to consider a few additional tasks in your plan. So the industry safe use standards, including ISO 18893 and ANSI A92.22, require a system of work or a safe use plan to be developed by the MEWP employer or user. A MEWP specific safe use plan will include the implementation of all user requirements defined in our standards. At a minimum, you should consider these standards are the established industry best practices that you should consider using. Too often I hear OSHA is law and ANSI standards are voluntary. Believe me, these are the best practices that go far beyond what the OSHA requirements will actually articulate. This plan will assist you to address all the requirements needed to prevent accidents, personal injuries, and property damage. This screen provides just a good visual of the 11 topics that must be included in your plan. Today, we're going to briefly review each of these topics and specific processes and procedures that will aid site management to effectively manage risk and avoid incidents that can cause harm or damage. Well, the first thing we're going to talk about is the site risk assessment, which is part of that plan. And while most people really understand what a risk assessment is in its most fundamental concept, let's review the 7 stages of a risk assessment, and you can ID whether or not you're doing them. First, identify the task to be undertaken. At the first stage of the risk assessment, the task to be undertaken should be clearly identified together with the location and timing of the work. It makes a difference whether you're doing it in the middle of summer with heat or in the middle of winter with extreme cold temperatures and snow and other types of conditions. So what is the task? Select the appropriate MEWP. The user shall select the appropriate machine based on considerations of factors included but not limited to the task undertaken, the constraints of the work site, ground conditions, site access and proximity to the public or other workers. You must assess the risk associated with the task. The risk associated with the task specific to MEWP operations must be identified. Identify the control measures. So once the hazards and risk are involved with the task have been identified, procedures and measures required to control them shall be identified and implemented. You must identify safe work procedures. And this is one where I could say I think that people fall short on. And the risk assessment results are used to plan safe work procedures, including the contingencies required in carrying out the identified task. Then if all things go wrong, you must have a rescue plan. And rescue plan is a necessary component of any risk assessment when working at height. There are situations that require prior planning to ensure safe and timely rescue. And last but not least, you got to communicate the results. Having a great plan sitting on the shelves in the office is no value to workers in the field. They need to know and understand these plans. So let's drill down a little bit more into the risk assessment, because if I put that out there, here they are. How do we get these things done? So the first one, while we learn to manage a project, do we equally consider how to manage individual tasks on a project? There are lots of things that need to be done with each task present with their own potential risk. With mobile elevated work platforms or MEWP operations, there are many tasks involved in their operation as listed on this slide. While the example spreadsheet I have over here isn't specific to MEWPs, it gives you an example of many tasks are occurring at the same time and they require planning. So think about just one of the items on here, delivery and pickup from the site. All right, well, that seems pretty obvious. What planning needs to take place? Well, what happens if you're dropping it off on the side of the road? What are the potential risks and hazards there? What needs to be taking place to ensure the safety? What happens if you're pulling it into the work site where there's all other types of equipment working in the vicinity where it's being dropped off? These are an example of the task and the potential hazards that you must consider with every one of these potential tasks associated with MEWP operations. So selecting an appropriate MEWP for the task seems easy enough, especially if you're renting it. You call up and say, I need a lift that gets me up so high. But I can assure you that most are unaware of the many different MEWP models and machine options available. You can see in this picture a wide range of equipment that is available to get you up to a certain height to perform your task. Further, simplicity can become more complicated as site conditions or task requirements conflict with what equipment is available. So the fact that you may want one of these pieces of equipment, it's not available, you now have to go back and say, okay, what do I have to do in my risk assessment to address the equipment that I have? Are your managers trained and aware of what equipment is available in the marketplace? You must have a qualified person assigned to complete the task in the safe use plans who are trained, qualified, as supervisors, managers, as part of this plan. You should ensure that personnel who manage MEWP operations and those who directly supervise MEWP operators are trained regarding the rules and regulations that apply to MEWPs. The proper selection of them to be formed to perform the task required, the awareness of potential hazards associated with MEWPs, and the means to protect against them. Today, these courses are available 100% online and can be taken at any time at the convenience of the trainee. So there's no reason why we aren't developing people who are qualified to perform these tasks. Included within the MEWP selection process is a provision for work equipment associated with MEWP operations. Here you can consider associated equipment that is in addition to the MEWP. IPAF offers tools that assist in MEWP selection and the questioning for all of these elements. So you can see accessories, PPE, and preparing everything around the site. So if you're going to be dropping it off in an area that needs perimeter fencing on it, you need to make sure the perimeter fencing is in place. So it really gets to not just the MEWP selection, but in terms of the process and task, all the work equipment associated with it. But go too fast. So are your managers aware of new innovations that can assist in the safe and productive completion of the task? Your safe use plan should consider adding a requirement for annual continuous professional development hours specific to MEWPs for your managers. So here you have an example of a couple of items that are out in the marketplace today. If you have lone workers, there's devices out there for motion detection alarms, so that if they stop moving and he's out there by himself, doing a prompt rescue isn't going to happen. They have helmets that have proximity alarms in them. There are now apps for scissor lifts to allow you to drive them if you're going through a doorway, so you don't have to be on them and exposing to hazards. Sensors for collision. So there's a wide range of products that are out there. So when we're talking about the proper selection, these things become part and parcel to your planning. Yep. A risk assessment must consider all potential hazards associated with the task. The awareness of known potential hazards can come from readily available sources, starting with your own OSHA accident log. This will identify your own experiences. Specific to MEWP use, the IPAF Global Safety Report provides analysis of the main causes of serious injuries or fatalities occurring with MEWP operations. Knowing and addressing the most common issues is required due diligence when preparing a risk assessment. The system wants to act on its own today. So while hazards may exist in the workplace, the proximity to work, duration of the task, and other factors will identify the probability or risk level from low to high. Further, severity of consequences impact must be considered. As the risk level and severity increases, the need to mitigate the risk increases. In our examples, we're going to talk about working near overhead power lines where the risk probability and severity is high with shock or death. So we need to have adequate safe use procedures in place to mitigate the risk as the severity increases. So a control measure is a required action. So we're going to talk now about control measures. So a control measure is required action to take place in response to a hazard to eliminate or lower the risk of potential harm. Electrocutions are one of the leading causes of fatalities associated with MEWP operations. It is clearly a hazard that requires specific attention when there is exposure in the work area to overhead power lines. IPAF takes a very conservative position in our training that states that if you're near a wood pole, stay at least 30 feet away. With a steel transition line, stay at least 50 feet away. But standards state that you must stay at least 10 feet away from the power line with any part of the body, conductive object, or any part of the MEWP. In this particular picture, you see, we go over there and we put 10 feet away, and I give an example of a scissor lift and a boom lift. So on the scissor lift, we're 10 feet away, but now we have overhead power lines, and you can elevate into it. Here you can see with a boom lift, why we say we're just going to stay 10 feet away. As the worker is working towards the building and paying attention to his task, what is he not looking at, which is the ability for the knuckle part of the boom to extend into the protected area and expose themselves to a hazard. That brings me to, that brings me to this example that I talked about earlier. And here was an incident that occurred where they identified that there was a hazard in place. And you can see that they booted with insulators all of these lines. And while that seems like that is the control measure, what they missed are the safe use procedures. Because here, obviously, we end up having an incident where while the insulators are in place, in the operation of the MEWP, the actual structure of the MEWP actually came into contact with the insulators. And all insulators, no matter where they are, aren't intended for you to contact them at all. They're just added protection. And in this particular case, the structure came down, came in contact with the insulator, knocked it off, and the machine then was exposed to direct contact with energized power lines, and the circumstances or the results were catastrophic. So again, safe use procedures would have put in place procedures that would prevent that from occurring, not just booting the lines. Yep. Another important stage, as I mentioned, is risk in the risk assessment is the development of a rescue plan. And 911 is not a rescue plan. So machine malfunctions, a full arrest from the work platform. The MEWP is caught or snagged on part of a structure. The operator becomes incapacitated. The machine is electrified by contact with overhead power lines. The machine is tipped over, leaning against a structure. These are examples of various situations that may require different types of rescues. Deciding what action to take in the midst of the emergency can take extra time that can add to the danger of the workers in distress or create additional hazards if done incorrectly. There are three basic approaches to a rescue plan that must be considered. First is the easy one, which is a self-rescue with the persons involved. Then we have assisted rescues by other people in the work area, ground people that can lower from the ground controls as an example. And last but not least is the most serious, which is a technical rescue, meaning that if the machine is tipped over, if the machine and leaning against another structure, if it's in direct contact with power lines, you're going to need technical rescue and emergency personnel. So again, a rescue plan must also include training to ensure that the workers become qualified to perform this important task in a timely manner. So again, this is part of the risk assessment. And last but not least is the objective of developing a plan is using it, and it must be communicated with all involved with MEWP operations. So before the job starts and periodically throughout a long-term job, the risk assessment shall be reviewed to check if any parts of the task or the work environment have changed and the effects that it could have on the safety of operations. If any modifications to the risk assessment are required, these shall be communicated to all of the parties involved prior to resuming the task. So think about what I just went over and understand that we've now reviewed one of the required tasks in a MEWP specific safe use plan, a risk assessment. It is the foundation of the planning, and it's important to be aware of its role, importance, and how to conduct a complete and thorough risk assessment. But again, this is one piece of a safe use plan. So now let's continue to go through what managers and supervisors are required to know as an essential tool to being competent in developing the safe use plan. My system wants to work without me today. Yep. Please stop. Okay. Our next topic is the access, preparation, and maintenance of the site. So when selecting the correct MEWP for the task, consideration must include the ability for the MEWP to safely move to the work area. As site conditions change, proper maintenance of the site to accommodate MEWPs is necessary. A critical consideration is the assessment and evaluation of the ability to support of the support surface to adequately support the weight imposed by the MEWP. And understand that when you're taking a MEWP and you have a MEWP that weighs 24,000 pounds, take a boom lift in particular, you don't take 24,000 pounds and divide it by 4 and identify that as the weight. You could have as much as 70% of the weight of that machine over one tire based on the configuration of that machine. So you must know what the ultimate weight is and the ability of that surface to support the load. This is not knowledge that most MEWP operators are going to be qualified to answer. And your plan must define who is qualified to apply this task. You can see many situations here where the ability for the machine to actually be on these conditions is in question. Next item is MEWP inspections and repairs. So know your responsibilities. Are you renting the equipment or do you own it? Who's responsible for the maintenance, inspection, and repairs? Are the individuals qualified to perform these tasks? Is it clear to your personnel using the equipment what their responsibilities are, what they should do and what they shouldn't do? All MEWPs require scheduled maintenance, pre-delivery inspections, frequent inspections, annual inspections, daily pre-start inspections, maintenance and repair training, implementing maintenance and repair safety precautions, replacement parts being identical or equivalent to the MEWP part or component, and registering the MEWP with the manufacturer to ensure that you receive safety-related bulletins. Your plan must be clear who's responsible to perform these tasks, the rental company or the user, and if the user, the training to have personnel become qualified to perform these tasks. Hopefully you can see how MEWP-specific safe use planning is a needed document to support all levels of MEWP operations. Too often it's thought that getting personnel through the operator course is all that's necessary to make them qualified. By definition, training enables one to become qualified. Here are some of the requirements you must include in your plan. Operator qualifications. The user shall ensure that the MEWP operator is physically and mentally capable of operating the MEWP safely. What does that mean you have to do? Mentally capable. Well, if he's frightened to be elevated in the air, it's really not a good thing to say that he is capable of performing the task. The employer must ensure and the operator candidates are trained and familiarized in accordance with the standards for training before being authorized to operate the equipment. The employer is responsible to assess if personnel are qualified to perform the task. If you look at this example here, think about this machine that's 185 feet in the air on the sidewalk in a metropolitan area. Do you think that an operator who is just trained on this is capable of operating in these conditions just after he's familiarized with it? And I hope you recognize the answer would be probably not. So what are the conditions? Are they in confined spaces? So the task involved with it goes beyond saying, I have a trained operator. The employer must ensure that the MEWP operator provides instructions or otherwise ensures that the occupants are provided with the basic knowledge to work safely from that work platform as well. So how will employers assess the proficiency of the MEWP operators? Who's going to complete that assessment? These are issues that a safe use plan must define and communicate. All personnel have successfully completed MEWP operator training. When would retraining be necessary? That must be considered within your safe use plan. To accomplish that, all personnel who directly supervise MEWP operators must become qualified regarding the rules, regulations, and standards that apply to MEWPs, including provisions for safe use, training and familiarization, and the tasks to be performed. A qualified MEWP supervisor or manager must be assigned to monitor, supervise, and evaluate operators on a regular basis to ensure their proficiency. The evaluations must be accomplished through visual operations at an observation at a minimum, which will be documented. So some industry standards provide examples when retraining may be required. And that includes deterioration of proficiency. How do you know that? Again, through these ongoing evaluations, following an accident or near miss. If conditions in the workplace change in a manner that could affect the safe operation of the MEWP, or new technologies or working methods are put in place. So it's really critical that we understand the role of a MEWP supervisor and ensuring that the operators are performing the task as defined within your plan.
Try using the arrows, Tony, the keyboard arrows instead of the wheel.
Yeah, I am. It's progressing on its own.
Yeah.
So trained and qualified supervisors, again, a supervisor is an entity assigned by the user to monitor operations, the operating performance and supervise their work. Again, today there are courses that are out there on this requirement by ANSI standards for MEWP supervisors. These courses are readily available. They can be done 100% online. There are many places to provide that you can secure this training. So again, this is something that you want to make sure that your people are qualified to perform all of these tasks. Another element that's part of this plan is protection from authorized use. So how do you prevent unauthorized use of a MEWP is something that you must take into consideration. You can't just take it and park it out where kids could get on this machine and play with it. Parked in a secure compound or in a supervised area, inaccessible to unauthorized persons, requirements for keys to be removed when the MEWP is not in use, keys issued only to authorized operators and retained by them until the end of the project. And there's new technology that's out there, such as keypads and telematics, that can actually restrict who can operate the equipment beyond the keys. So just be aware of the fact that prevention of unauthorized use is out there. If you're in the construction industry, it's how common is it that you go to a job site, the next morning you come in and the MEWP that you were using isn't there anymore because other people have keys to the equipment. So how is it that we protect the equipment from unauthorized use? And one of the other elements that's out here, which I'm not sure gets adequate attention as well, is the safety of other persons who are not involved with the MEWP operation. So, again, you go to a job site and you can actually see, signs up, stay out of this area. So while you can require training and supervision for your own personnel, how will you ensure the safety of others in or near the MEWP work area, to include other workers on the site, the general public working near or passing by your work area, or other moving vehicles that may be exposed to potential hazards during MEWP operations? Your plan must consider these as part of your plan as the protection of others. Another element that's out there are site-specific requirements. So understand that when we provide training, no matter what that training is, whether it's for the operator or for the supervisor, we talk about things that are requirements for the specific safe use of MEWP operators. So when your MEWP operator is getting that general knowledge, work sites may add requirements that exceed MEWP standard requirements or have unique site-specific hazards that require specialized protocols, as shown in some of the examples on the screen. The safe use plan must define how you will ensure that site-specific requirements are provided to affected personnel, such as in pre-job meetings. So think about, you go to a job site and there's hazardous materials on the job site. How we protect against that is not included in MEWP operator training. So there are elements that you need to be aware of that are specific to a job site. Another example is on all Group B machines, which is boom type machines, you're required to wear personal fall protection, but the standards and OSHA regulations do not require personal fall protection in general on use of Group A or vertical lifts, like scissor lifts. However, you could go to a job site and the job site may require personal fall protection on any mobile elevator platform. So you need to make sure that people are prepared on how to comply appropriately with those site requirements. And last but not least, within the scope of this plan is record retention. So industry standards have specific requirements and recommendations for documentation of many of the tasks that are included with this. This further reinforces the correct implementation of the task. And last but not least, proof of completion. One thing that you can find out when you go into a court of law is that if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So if you don't have proof, you really have a weakness in your risk management plan. And that should be, again, something that you consider as to what documentation should be required and maintaining all of that information in the event that you need it. So again, a housekeeping type of issue, but a critical issue in your planning. So if you have a plan that already considers all the topics and issues that we've received, congratulations. I believe that you're a minority of companies who are investing in thorough risk management on your projects. If you are like most companies, you have room for improvement, and we hope that this session today has assisted at least in raising awareness on issues that can raise your competencies. Safety is a journey, not a destination. You'll always be in motion to ensure that every job, every task, every employee, every contingency is addressed in your safe use plan. And as the sign says, big journeys begin with small steps. Continuous improvements are to be celebrated successes. So let IPAF assist you on your journey. One of the things that our North American Council did in 2021 is develop a MEWP Safe Use Program guide. So all of the elements that we talked about today were put together into a guidebook that's free, available, downloadable on our website. So you can see the link here below, developing a MEWP Safe Use Program guide. And within that guide, we offer a brief overview of each topic with action steps and resources to support each of those sections. We as an association are technical experts and are available to assist with questions and helping you be safe in performing your task. So there's a lot of tools that are out there, and IPAF isn't alone in doing those. A lot of our manufacturer members and rental companies also have tools to support you. But here is a complete guide that goes into even some additional details on how you can develop your MEWP specific safe use guide program. So in summary, a safe use plan is just a roadmap to where you want to go. It's a document to assist employers and their employees to achieve the goal of a safe and productive workplace. Hopefully, much of what is required in your plan should already be in place. This is simply formalizing the plan, verification that all issues are adequately addressed, communicated, and followed. If it seems like a lot of work, it doesn't have to be. So again, we have a guide that will help you take those step-by-step processes to identify the things that are critical to you. Understand if you're out there using mobile elevated work platforms to change a light bulb in your warehouse once a year, thorough as a contractor who's using this equipment every day in all types of work environments and all types of conditions. So it really can be tailored to your needs. All users must adhere to the requirements of our industry standards and manufacturers' recommendations. All users must develop a safe use program. And supervisors, operators, and occupants must be aware of and comply with safe use standards that are incorporated into this plan. So if you have your plan that puts all those things in place, you're in a great position to minimize your potential risk for hazards that are inevitable anytime you're working at height. Just as a summary of other upcoming events, I invite everyone to join us to one of our big events. That's our Innovate Workshop, which is in September in Chicago. It's attached to the ALH conference, and these two events combined will provide a great opportunity for people to network and be exposed to a tremendous amount of information. Our workshop is very unique in the fact that we will have 10 groups working on different issues and listening to each of you who have your own experience on how we can, as an industry, improve the safety of our operations. As our North American chairman, Ebba Christensen from Reachmaster has said, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And all participants are leaning in and innovating in ways to improve our industry. So we invite you to that. I also state that upcoming is the 3-year ConExpo ConAg show in Vegas. IPAF will have a booth there. That should be interesting and provide you some new insights and information. So put that on your calendar as well. And we invite you to come visit us at our booth. And that concludes it. If I didn't mention it, if you had any questions, you can go to the Q&A tab and we can look at answering those questions. I appreciate everyone's time. I hope that what we have presented here today can bring some insight and value to you. I hope that it does cause you to think differently about different items. And we'll conclude now with some Q&A. So let me see. All right, I'm going to go here. In your opinion, when would a contractor train someone just as an occupant, not as an operator? We have most of all of our employees able to operate a MEWP because they have to work by themselves. Having an occupant would lessen the amount of an employees that we would have to train. So an operator is someone who has direct control over the movement of the mobile elevated work platform, and they have a specific requirement to be trained, familiarized, authorized, monitored, supervised, and evaluated on an ongoing basis. An occupant is somebody who is intended not to be an operator of the equipment, but to be in the work platform to assist in the work itself. The standards require that the operator or the employer in some manner provide general information to them on how they are required to safely work within the MEWP. So a simple example is that if you have a person who's in the work platform and he's in a boom type lift, he needs to know that he needs to be wearing personal fall protection. He needs to know that he has to connect it to a anchorage provided by the manufacturer. He needs to know that what the weight capacity of the machine is. So it's the basic fundamentals of how to safely work within that platform. You don't want him climbing on the guardrails, all those things, because he hasn't gone through operator training. So if he is not intended to be an operator of the equipment, he only needs to be provided the information at the time that he's in the platform with the basic fundamentals of how to work safely as an occupant of the machines. So hopefully, Fred, we answered that to your satisfaction. Who keeps the training test results, the user or the trainer? Well, in that particular case, the testing is normally kept by the person who is delivering the training. However, you get a certificate of completion of that training as the employer of the equipment. So that's typically how that works out. I'm not sure that there's any reason why you couldn't get it if you request it from the instructor, but typically when you get it, you're getting a list of Q&As, and you have just the answers 1, 3, 5. So it may not be effective for you. So it really is one that normally the person who is delivering the training keeps the test results. Please advise of precautions for welding from MEWPs. There is specific language about welding from the MEWPs, and it really talks about grounding more so than welding itself. So there is specific language that is in the standards about grounding. The real issue that you would have outside of grounding of welding equipment is the fact that obviously you have something that's hot, meaning there have been fires that burn from it. So there are other elements that would be part of a welding course for protection that you would have to address outside of MEWP operations. So within our operations, we don't our standards, we don't address anything outside of not using the MEWP itself as a ground for your welder. Do you have any do you have any recommendations on self-rescue accessories? The answer is we do not, as an association, make recommendations in general on equipment. In terms of self-rescue accessories, there are, depending upon the type of equipment that you're referring to, we really look at it in a hierarchical approach. So the first one would be self-rescue. So obviously we would like to have the machine itself be able to lower from either the work platform or from the ground controls to get individuals down from the ground. If someone is stuck in an elevated position, so take a machine that like a machine that goes 180 to plus feet in the air, you can't call 911 because they don't have the accessibility of equipment that can reach someone to move them up if they're stuck in the air. So in those particular cases, if you do not have a plan in place where you have devices that can actually lower someone down with a rope, that has to be set up for that specific machine, for those specific devices. I would say there are options out in the marketplace, but they are again going to be product specific based on the height and capacity that need to be part of that consideration. By training all employees as operators, then would there be a necessity to have occupants? The answer is no. I mean, if everyone is a trained operator, they have all the information to do that, and you would not have to have occupant knowledge because as an occupant, they have all of the training as an operator. The only issue that I would put on the table for you as an example, I know that my brother-in-law is a engineer, and he actually will go in to do inspections, but he's not allowed to operate the equipment. So he wouldn't want to be, and his company wouldn't allow him to be an operator of the equipment. So that's an example where occupant knowledge would be okay. If you as an employer want to ensure that all your people who get in the machine as an operator or an occupant are adequately aware of the risk, then putting them through operator training would be more than what they need and eliminate the need for additional occupant knowledge. Can simulation replace MEWP supervisor requirements when it comes to assessing time? In simulation. Daniel Smith, I'm not sure whether you're asking about a VR simulator. Can simulation replace that? Is that what you're looking for? If you can respond back, and then I can respond to that. Yes. Okay. So VR simulators are out in the marketplace today, and can a simulator replace MEWP supervisor requirement when it comes to assessing competency? And the answer is, as an industry, the answer would be yes. VR simulators, and again, a VR simulator covers a lot of ground. So it depends upon having a VR simulator that has a program that is created to do that assessment. So there are some that do that, but they go out there and just generally say, a VR simulator. The answer would be not generally a universal yes, because not all VR simulator programs are set to do that assessment. But there are those that are out there, and as an industry, they are allowed to be used in doing assessments and actually used for retraining as well. So hopefully I answered that to your satisfaction. Should fall arrest or fall restraint systems be used in MEWPs? And the answer is yes. And that is that when you're looking at MEWPs as a whole, there are certain machines like a single man basket with that's small, can only allow fall restraint because of the stability of the machine, the size of the machine, and they only are provided with a fall restraint anchorage. So you couldn't use fall arrest on certain MEWPs. A large majority of MEWPs in the marketplace are supplied with a fall arrest anchorage. And when a manufacturer is designing the machines, they're only allowed to have one type of anchorage, either an arrest anchorage or restraint anchorage. They can't have both on a single machine. So most of them have fall arrest. Even when you have fall arrest, when you're doing a risk assessment, the general recommendation is to have a lanyard that is as short as possible to try to maintain an individual in restraint when the machine is in motion. However, the fact that you end up having large platforms and using a longer lanyard to allow them to properly work within the confines, fall arrest would be an acceptable option. The one parameter that I always like to point out is that the guardrail system is the primary fall protection for every mobile elevated work platform. So where do you have a need for personal fall protection when you have a full guardrail platform? And in most cases, the answer is you don't. We have a specific requirement for personal fall protection in boom type lifts because of the physics of a boom platform, where you literally can be ejected, what we call the catapult effect, out of a fully guardrail platform. So that's why on boom type lifts, both OSHA and ANSI standards require personal fall protection in addition to the guardrails on boom type lifts, and it's not required on scissor lifts because you don't have that same physics in the design of a scissor lift. However, risk assessments could get to the point where you choose the optimum machine to do the job. You may be in a position where this is as close as you can get, and there may be overreaching, in which case a personal fall protection device is required. So again, we prefer that people use restraint where possible and arrest where needed. Is there any specific regulations regarding vision, i.e. 2020? To my knowledge, I know within our standards, the answer is no. They must be physically and mentally capable of performing the task is an evaluation. So 2020, the answer is if a risk assessment identifies that based on what they're doing, that would be a parameter for that. The answer would be, potentially, but there's nothing specific within the standards that talks about this outside of saying, are they, in your evaluation of them, physically and mentally capable of performing the task involved? And if having 20/20 vision is a requirement, which I've never seen anyone go through that requirement, I would say if you put a risk assessment that identifies the need for that, then the answer would be yes. But I would say generally the answer is no specific regulations outside of the general requirement to be physically fit for the task. No other questions? Molto bene. Well, again, folks, we greatly appreciate your attention today and presence and participation as participants to the event. As I mentioned, we at our website, www.ipaf.org. If you go and do a search on MEWP Safe Use Plan Guide and the search, you can download that available and have that available for you. If you have any questions, you have my personal email address down below, tony.croat@ipaf.org, and myself or my colleague Diego, we would be glad to assist where we can. So let's see, does the updated MEWP standards allow for the operator to self-certify themselves on the variety of MEWP class or groups once they have been certified, given that the new requirement calls out the safety manual or the user? I'm not sure that I completely understand the question, but the answer is that a operator cannot recertify themselves on retraining or on other categories of equipment. It has to be done by a qualified trainer or evaluator to add them. So if they were trained, as an example, on boom lifts and they go out and they want to operate a scissor lift, the answer is no, they can't self-certify. The only thing that is involved with self-certification within the standards regarding an operator is, if allowed by their employer, they are allowed to self-familiarize on a model, which means that they can, they're capable of moving forward, reading the operator's manual, and have the needed information to familiarize themselves with the general operation of that equipment. Right? Who is responsible for maintaining the periodic inspection records for the long-term rental of units? The owner is responsible for the ongoing inspections and maintenance of equipment. So whoever that owner is, whether it's the rental company or if the owner is a contractor who owns the equipment, the owner is responsible for the maintenance and records of the machine. So again, thank you all for your time. We've exceeded our 1 hour limit. I don't want to keep people on longer than what we had planned. I appreciate your time. Again, you do have my contact information below. If in the future, if anyone has an additional question that they would like for us to discuss, please feel free to email me and we would be glad to have discussion with you and assist you as best we can. So again, great appreciation to our sponsor for assisting us in making these events possible. I thank our North American Council members for all of their work in developing our MEWP specific safe use guide that's available for all of you to use, which was kind of the document that we've been discussing in today's presentation. And lastly, I thank you all for your time today and attending today's session. So with that, I conclude today's session. This will be recorded. A link of it will be made available to all of you who registered. So feel free to share this with others if there's a desire to have others to review this as well. So thank you, and that concludes our session.